You're listening to the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast, episode 50. The 6 elements of exam technique, why they're important, and how each of them can increase your teens' exam results. I'm Katie Jones, and with over 15 years in education as an award-winning high school teacher, international external examiner, and as a study coach, I've helped thousands of students skyrocket their results and confidence. And this podcast is where I share all my insights, tactics, and tips with you, the parent, so you can help your hardworking teen get happy, smart, and successful in their study, and have you both enjoy the journey along the way. This is the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast. Well, hey, VIPs, I hope you and your teens are doing great. I was going to say that I can't believe we're at episode 50, but in some ways, it feels like I have been doing the podcast forever. As in, it just feels like a part of my life and a part of rock solid study now, not like, OMG, this lesson feels like it's going on forever. Not in that way, in a good way. But also, in some ways, I am like, wow, 50. Really? I have talked about 50 different things to do with study or exams or results or confidence. It feels like, I don't know, maybe like 20, 30, but it's very cool to be getting to 50 episodes. And of course, once I realized as I was planning that, hey, this is number 50, I did go and do a little bit of research, statistical research, aka productive procrastination, before getting to work on things. I do like a good statistic. So firstly, we are up to 7,421 downloads on the podcast since launching the podcast, which I think is pretty awesome. But obviously, I'm also like, I don't really know if that's good or not in the world of podcasts. Is that a lot? Is it not a lot? So I did go and check out some of those stats, and I couldn't find any revealing numbers about the first 50 episodes. But because I typed in 50 into part of my Google search, I did find out that if you get over 145 downloads within your first 30 days, then you are in the top 50% of all podcasts. So, of course, I then had to go check our stats, and we had 330. So more than twice as much. So a nice tick in that box. Plus, did you know that only half of all podcasts make it past 14 episodes? 14 episodes. So I'm counting 50 as a win, and I intend to stay with this for the long game. I have already, in fact, decided what I want to do when we hit 100 episodes. You know I am a planner, so I am already planning ahead that far. I've already actually started the project for it, so I'm going to create a kind of best of the podcast book, or maybe more of a workbook. I haven't totally decided, but it's going to have the key takeaways, quotes, most important points, all collated and curated. I've actually had a couple of requests from listeners for this sort of thing already, because I know that we all often listen to podcasts while we're on the go. And this is what listeners have said to me, that they've heard some really good points, but they could do with having these noted down somewhere. And additional stat, I also found out in amongst my Googling that 59% of people tune into a podcast while doing something else simultaneously. And that is definitely me. If I do listen to something particularly useful on a podcast, I will then try to make myself sit down and take notes on it afterwards at some point, because usually I'm driving or dog walking or food prepping while I am listening to podcasts. So rarely do I have a notebook at my side. So I do already have sneak preview. I have a spreadsheet set up where the team and I are already inputting content for that podcast best of book. So I'm really looking forward to producing and then sharing that in future. Just another 50 to go for us to get there. So that's what's coming in the long term and what I'm working on just very subtly in the background. And here's what I have for you today for podcast episode number 50. It is one of my favorite topics and a really important concept for all students: exam technique. Because if we think about it, there is only really 1 mark in each of the cutoffs between each of the grade boundaries. Between an A and a B, there is 1 mark. Between a C or a D, there is 1 mark. Now, that can either be pretty depressing or hugely exciting, depending on how you think about it. And the exciting way to think about this and look at this is that 1 mark can easily come down to exam technique rather than subject skills or extra knowledge. Not that those aren't important, they just aren't the only important thing. Now, as I was thinking about exam technique, I went back and found a post that I had previously seen from years ago when I started doing work on exam technique. It was from an online forum from a real examiner, which I had copied and pasted. It was a while back as part of an introduction to Catapult 6 in the 10-week grade transformation program. And I like it because it reveals some of the most common mistakes examiners see students making in exams. And I just wanted to share it with you, and I wanted to share it with students in the program, because then you know that it is not just me saying these things. So this examiner wrote, and I quote, "What I found is that just because someone knows the topic inside out, it doesn't mean they'll do well in exams. Their technique might be really poor. For example, not properly allocating time to each question, not reading the question carefully, such as students misreading the questions or making incorrect assumptions and then going off on a tangent, or not planning or checking their answers, so their points end up everywhere and the answer is incoherent." End of quote. Now, did you notice how none of these issues even mentions subject knowledge or revising for exams? And did you pick up on the first thing they said? I would love it if I had a name for this person, but they didn't. They posted anonymously, and this was years ago. They said that just because someone knows the topic inside out, it doesn't mean they'll do well in exams. In fact, that examiner went on to say in their post that while I acknowledge exams are there to test people's knowledge, the fact is they are also testing people's ability to do things the right way. I'm going to say that again. They also test people's ability to do things the right way. In other words, put the information across in the right way. Now, of course, subject knowledge is required for exam success, but when it comes to exams, when you think about it, one is fairly useless without the other. So great exam technique, but no knowledge means a lot of blank spaces left on the exam paper. And having all of the knowledge about the content, but no exam technique skills means probably lots of writing in those answer spaces, maybe even a feel-good factor about how it went until the result says otherwise, because that information wasn't given in the right way. Because it doesn't matter how much subject knowledge they have, even if they are a total expert on a topic, if your teen does not respond to a question or task in the right way, they won't be able to access the marks in the mark scheme or assessment criteria. Notice I say even access. I'm not even talking about them getting them. They may not even be accessing them. Because amazing grades are achieved when both of these things, the knowledge plus applying it in the way that the question asks, are working together, when they have great subject knowledge and excellent exam technique. And this even still happens at uni. I have so many parents and students who go through the 10-week program, have success through their ATAR or through their year 12 exams, and then tell me how useful this also is for uni. And I will tell you, while I was Googling to go find that original quote, I've been doing a lot of Googling this week, because I did want to properly reference it and find the source so I could put it in the show notes, which I couldn't. I couldn't go back and find that exact forum post. But what I did come across was another examiner writing about this issue, a lecturer at York University in England. And he told the story of him and his friend Graham. And I thought this would be kind of interesting to share with you. He said, throughout my time at school and university, and this was him kind of writing to his students at uni, he said, I had a friend called Graham. We did exams in exactly the same subjects from the ages of 15 to 22. Despite the fact that Graham is quite a lot brighter than I am, as far as I can remember, he never beat me in a single exam. Why? Well, mostly because he got interested in the subjects and even started exploring them. But I was just trying to pass the exams. And he put brackets, Graham is now a professor at the University of Glasgow. I'm just a lecturer here at York, which goes to show that being brighter probably does pay off in the longer term. However, there's no reason he shouldn't have beaten me in at least a few of those exams. Close brackets. He then goes on to say, since then, I have seen the issue from the other side, having set hundreds of exam questions and marked thousands of exam scripts. Remember, scripts is the name we give to completed exam papers. And I must say that the standard of exam technique apparent from many students at York, supposedly one of the top universities in the UK, is, to be frank, awful. These are his words. He said, it's almost as if many of you have no idea what you are doing. Now, that last sentence that he wrote does sound kind of harsh, I know, but it's only because those of us, because I get it, those of us who are both educators and examiners find this so frustrating to see, which is why, in my opinion, exam technique is the most important skill for any student to walk into the exam hall with. And so that's why I want to spend this episode sharing with you exactly what exam technique is and the 6 elements, or kind of like the 6 sub-skills within exam technique that I believe exist, having spent years of training students to excel in it. Now, for my personal definition, me personally, this is not taken from Google or anywhere else, exam technique is knowing how to give the best possible answer to a question, i.e., one that gains the most marks, as efficiently as possible, given the amount of knowledge that you have or one has on the topic in the question. So, whatever the amount of subject knowledge that your teen has, we want to focus on how they can get the most marks possible from that amount of knowledge. Because I have seen some students who aren't really that knowledgeable in a topic get higher marks in certain questions than those students who are super knowledgeable, just because they happen to write down relevant things that get marks on the mark scheme, as opposed to those students who wrote lots of information but not necessarily with the right focus or at the right level. Basically, not in, going back to those words from the start, the right way. And I will say this. This might be a little bit unpopular, but I have seen it happen many times. So for me, it is a fact and it is worth sharing. Often, it's the lazier students. I kind of paused to want to use that word, but I'm going to say it. It's the lazier students, those who want to do just the bare basics. Let's call them efficient students. The bare basics to get by, who actually have the best exam technique. That is often the case. And I know that might not be great to hear, but here's why I think that is. It's because they're thinking, what exactly do I have to do here? And how can I do it in the simplest, fastest way? What's the least I can write to satisfy the needs or the requirements of the question? And that is basically what exam technique is all about. Putting across the information that's been asked for in the exact way that it wants it, in the most succinct way, getting most marks in least words and in least amount of time in the exam. So it's about getting most bang for their buck, most marks for the knowledge they have, most marks for the words they write and the time they take up. So how do they do this? By mastering the 6 elements of exam technique and becoming an expert in answering exactly what any exam question, essay title, or assignment task even is asking. And do it in the way that meets the maximum number of criteria on the mark scheme. So the 6 elements of exam technique are, in no particular order, time, using resources provided, including examples and case studies, structure, QWC, which stands for quality of written communication, and, last but not least, command words. So those are the 6: time, using resources provided, including examples and case studies, structuring their answer, the quality of their written communication, and command words, or responding to command words, more precisely. So let's go into each of those in turn. I'll explain each of them a little bit. So first, we have time. And if your teen has ever run out of time in exams or been left with lots of time at the end of an exam, then this is a really important element for them to master. Now, as a general rule, minutes can be converted into marks. So there's reading time often at the start, and then they've got the actual working time. And then ideally, your teen also wants to keep some review time at the end, at least 5 minutes, ideally for longer exams or essay-style questions, more like 10 minutes to go back through and really check and review everything. So let's say it's a 2-hour exam, 120 minutes, and they have 10 minutes reading, and they want to keep 10 minutes for reviewing. So that leaves us with 100 minutes for working time. And so then let's say, for easy maths, the paper is out of 50 marks. So as a guide, they should be allocating approximately 2 minutes per mark. So about 4 minutes to complete a 2-mark question, 20 minutes for a 10-mark question. And this isn't exact. I don't want students to get too caught up with this, but if when they're doing a practice paper, they realize they've just spent 10 minutes on a 2-mark response, they now know that they are most likely either writing too much, or if they're just not writing during that time, maybe they're becoming distracted, or maybe it's an indicator that they don't really know the content well enough because they are just sat there feeling stuck. But for most students who are running out of time, and I know this is often a thing for hardworking students, it's usually because they are writing too much. So they might be repeating the question back as part of their answer, which is never required, especially for short response questions in an exam. They just need to get straight to the answer. It might be by giving more information than is required, kind of hedging their bets, putting stuff in just in case. Or often it's also by repeating information, maybe just wording it a little bit differently, but really just making the same point over and over. Those are a few of the most common ways that I see students writing more than they need to and taking up too much time and therefore not having enough time in an exam. Okay, next element is the use of resources that might be provided in an exam or with a question. Students need to explicitly use and refer to anything they are given along with a question in an exam. They absolutely need to use and integrate any kind of stimulus or source. It might be something like a graph, a data table, a photograph, maybe a text extract. Whatever it is, any time that they are provided with a resource of any kind, they are expected to use it and refer to it clearly and explicitly in their answer. They can't just imply that they've used it. So, for example, one way would be to refer to a specific point and actually name that data point on a graph. It might be referring to specific numbers from a data table. If it's a photo, they need to state that maybe it's in the top right-hand corner of photo 2 and name it. The man is wearing a red hat, which symbolizes whatever it is they want to write about. Not just saying that red is symbolic of X, Y, or Z, they actually need to state specifically where that has come from on which photo. So often, students lose marks for just not explicitly and clearly and directly relating to a resource or source that they have been provided. And this ties in really nicely with our next element, using examples and case studies in their answers. This often really goes for extended responses. Students often need to include these in extended response questions, sometimes even if the question doesn't specifically tell them to. So if an English essay question asks about a theme like friendship, for example, from a text, they need to refer to some specific characters as examples, even if it doesn't say to in the question. Or if an extended response business studies question asks about competition in business, the student needs to likely include an example of two competing companies to help explain their point. And knowing exactly how and when to do this is a skill that's going to put your teen at a much higher level on the exam success scale. Okay, next we have structure. Students definitely don't want to miss out on marks because their points were in such a muddle that the marker missed one of them or just couldn't keep track of some of the links that were being made between them. And remember, links are needed for those higher level criteria. And also remember that examiners, yes, will read through answers carefully and often reread some answers 2 or 3 times to make sure they've picked everything up. But you just don't want to make it hard for the marker to find or give you marks or take the chance that they might just miss something. So answers to extended responses, and in particular, of course, essay questions, need to be clear and structured. In the examples I gave in the recent training event that I did for our next level students, I really found this to be true in all of my research for questions at 6+ marks. Now, this is for 2 reasons. We definitely want every mark possible to be picked up, but also because it's much more time efficient in terms of actually writing the response. So making a plan for all extended response answers is absolutely key. And before your teen says, "But I don't have time to write a plan. I do not have enough minutes in the exam to go writing a plan for each extended response question," I want to let them know that for every minute spent planning, double that amount of time is going to be saved in them writing a clear and succinct response. So 2 minutes spent planning means 4 minutes saved. 5 minutes planning a full essay response is going to be 10 minutes faster in actually writing that full essay. Now, I know that that is going to be hard for some students to get on board with, but what I tell my next level students is if you feel like you don't have time to make a plan, that's the exact time you must write a plan. It's like an alarm bell. As soon as you're thinking, I don't have time to write a plan, that is the alarm that tells you, okay, I must write a plan. If you're that tight for time, that's when it is most important to be writing clearly, directly, and succinctly. Now, as you can probably tell, there are definitely overlaps between these 6 elements of exam technique. That's one of those overlaps between time and structure, and there are many more as well. This is why these things can make such a big difference. I talked about this back in the skill web. That was one of my personal favorite episodes, and I did have a few emails about it as well from parents saying how much it just made sense. This is where fixing one element or developing one skill can have multiple flow-on effects and have multiple benefits and can help boost some of the other skills as well. I believe this is why we have so many stories of students changing their results massively in a small amount of time because of these overlaps and the multiple benefits of getting just one skill in place. So go check out that episode right after we have covered elements 5 and 6 here. So our 5th element is QWC. Quality of written communication. So basically, that is how well your teen writes, how coherently and succinctly they put across the information. This includes things like their word choices, vocabulary, use of appropriate terminology or technical vocab. Basically, does their writing sound sophisticated, but also clear and succinct? So high quality, but not overly waffly or wordy. And is it accurate in terms of spelling, punctuation, and grammar? Now, for those of you with teens with things like dyslexia, please don't panic too much about this. Spelling is not as important for other subjects outside of English. As long as we can read what is intended, then it will absolutely get credited. But I do still want to make you aware that I have seen descriptors and marking criteria still specifically allocated to quality of written communication. That may not always be how it is worded on the mark scheme, but this happens even in subjects outside of English. Even in subjects, I have seen it in chemistry on an assignment task. So it is a thing. And it is usually still a small proportion of marks outside of English. But like we said at the start, one extra mark could be the difference of a whole grade. And finally, 6th element is, you might have guessed it, command words, also known as cognitive verbs, directives, task words. I have saved this on purpose for last because for me, it is the most important of all of the 6 elements. And I know I did say that these are in no particular order, but for this one, I kind of am saving the best till last. Command words are the verbs in questions, the action words like describe or analyze or calculate or justify. And your teen needs to really get really good at A, identifying them, B, knowing precisely what they're asking them to do, and C, how to respond to them. That is how they make sure they are actually answering the question, doing so at the right level of detail, and giving the markers what they have asked for. Now, I train students in all 6 of these elements of exam technique in detail in the 10-week grade transformation program. But I have a whole module. Catapult 7 is dedicated just to command words. It has its whole own module because it's so important, and frankly, there is quite a bit to it. But whether your teen is or isn't in the 10WGT, have a chat with them and have a think about which of these 6 elements you both believe are currently their strongest skills that they already do pretty well with, and which you consider might be their weaker areas, and which could be the highest priority for them to work on, which is going to be the thing that could make a huge difference if they get it fixed up or skilled up, would be a better way of putting it. And for now, just choose to develop that one priority skill. If they can master the exam technique element that is most holding them back, then just doing that will likely make a huge difference to their overall exam results. And if you would like to get more insights, more nitty-gritty how-tos on all things exams, then I'm going to be hosting an exam performance webinar, an information session for parents at the end of the month. So on Tuesday, mark your calendars, Tuesday, 30th of May. Registration isn't open for it yet, so you can't go register, but mark your calendars ready, 7:30 p.m. AEST, Tuesday, 30th of May, exams webinar with me. So I am totally in exam mode right now, and I'm going to keep sharing exam success tips and strategies for the next couple of weeks with you here on the podcast, because I know that lots of students will have mid-year exams, semester exams, trials coming up here in Australia and New Zealand, and that in the UK and in the Northern Hemisphere, students have their big final summer exams for GCSEs and A-levels. So stay tuned for all things exams over the next few weeks, and mark your calendars Tuesday, 30th of May for a special webinar with me. Have a brilliant week. I will see you back here on Tuesday for another episode of the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast. Take care, and I'll see you again soon. Bye. If you're ready to have your teen achieve their best possible results with less stress, then I want to invite you to enroll them in the 10-week grade transformation program, where they're going to learn the key concepts, skills, and strategies to catapult their performance in assessments and exams. It's risk-free. They either achieve bigger and better results with a whole lot more confidence in 10 weeks, or we refund you in full. Just head over to www.rocksolidstudy.com/program, and I'll see you there.